Very good evening or good day if you're in the Western Hemisphere, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Darren Ong, and I'm Head of Platform Growth in iSTOX. A very warm welcome from the iSTOX family to you, and thank you for dialing into today's fireside chat titled Investing in Singapore's Food Security. Tonight's webinar is iSTOX's inaugural series of fireside chats, which will touch on the spectrum of topics, ranging from technology, such as our decentralized finance blockchain webinar tomorrow night, to inclusive finance, real estate, and sustainability, just to name a few. We are pleased to have with us three accomplished panelist speakers tonight. Mr. Vincent Wei is the CEO and co-founder of Archisen, a Singapore-based agtech company that designs, develops, and operates solutions to grow ultra-fresh, ultra-local produce in cities. Archisen manages a farm that produces 90 tons of vegetables per year, and the vegetables are sold under the Just Produce brand. Prior to starting Archisen, Vincent co-founded BioMachines, a startup that developed a platform technology specializing in applications for agriculture and smart cities. As the Chief Operating Officer of BioMachines, he developed and managed projects that involve sensor instrumentation, sensor integration, wireless communications, pervasive networks, cloud computing, and environmental monitoring. Vincent holds a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering from National University of Singapore. Throughout his career, he has developed a wealth of experience in various Internet of Things projects, including the areas of agriculture, urban microclimate, geotechnical monitoring, remote surveillance, wireless sensor networks, urban greenery, environmental monitoring, and tree growth analysis. Our second panelist, Mr. Roger Yeo, is the Independent Director of Neo Group Limited. For those unfamiliar, Neo Group Limited is a household name in Singapore and a leading catering group backed by an integrated value chain with a strong track record accumulated over 26 years. Roger also sits on the board of NR Instant Produce Company Limited, Thailand. In addition, he also advises some entities on food and investments. Roger was the former Chief Executive Officer of Singapore Food Industries from 2006 to 2009, and he served on his board between 1998 and 2009. Prior to this, Roger was CEO of DE United Nigeria Limited. His other board experiences includes IM Technologies Limited, Bangkok Bank Public Company Limited, Thailand, Singapore Cruise Centre Private Limited, and SingX Private Limited and its subsidiaries. Our third panelist, Ms. Choo Oi Yee, is the Chief Commercial Officer of iSTOX, and she has 20 years of capital markets and merger and acquisition advisory experience. Prior to iSTOX, Oi Yee was heading Singapore investment banking for UBS AG. In her past 2 decades, she has advised on companies across sectors, including healthcare, technology, fintech, and real estate. She's currently also an authority member of the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore. Before I hand over to Vincent, just a little housekeeping. If you would like to ask any question, simply click on the Q&A button, which is represented by 2 speech bubbles at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you do not see this Q&A button, please move your cursor to the bottom of your screen and the Q&A button should display. I will then pose your question to the panelists. All right, Vincent, please take it away.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Darren. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Vincent, and I'm the CEO of Archisen. And we design, develop, and operate solutions to grow ultra-fresh, ultra-local produce in cities. I started my entrepreneurial journey with my co-founder, Savan, back in 2011. I had already graduated for a few years with a degree in mechanical engineering from the National University of Singapore. And he graduated with a degree in biological sciences from NTU. We incorporated a company called BioMachines, which was funded by the National Research Foundation. And we went about installing innovative Internet of Things systems in remote places, such as those in the picture that you see, teak plantations, cocoa plantations, and forests in Singapore, Indonesia, and Thailand. So we got to understand the problems faced in the agriculture and forestry industry, and we got to work with agronomists from various scientific fields. We closed the company in 2015 due to cash flow and various business reasons. Infected with the entrepreneurial bug, Savan and I started Archisen in 2016 with the objective of developing innovative ways to grow food for Singapore using controlled environment agriculture. The word Archisen refers to a combination of two words, architecture for sensor networks, as we believe that controlled environment agriculture involves the use of an integrated system of sensors and automation systems. We started off looking at vegetables, as that was an agricultural product that could be grown locally. And a lot of research had already been done. We studied different growing systems, experimented with different sensing solutions, and also built small-scale farms to test its commercial viability. There was a lot of technology out there, but being able to test and evaluate them and integrate them into a workable solution was the key challenge. So one of the key questions that we were trying to solve was, is farming a profitable business? Now, rural farms around the world experience low yields due to unfavorable climate and poor soils. There's also a high degree of spoilage when vegetables are being transported from rural to urban areas. And there has been a move towards high-tech farming in the past 10 years, but investors are usually concerned about the high startup costs and the high operational costs. The profitability of the farming business is particularly important for Singapore, as we import 90% of our vegetables, of which about 5,000 tons are leafies from US and Australia. This presents a huge reliance on overseas markets, and in difficult situations where logistics lines are cut or climate is unfavorable, our food supply is at the mercy of whatever we can import in. But if farming in Singapore is not profitable, then even if a farm is built, it wouldn't last. In the broader picture, there is great opportunity for vegetable production in Asia, as Asia consumes 75% of the vegetables worldwide. In summary, there is an urgent need to make controlled environment agriculture a sustainable business for future generations. Erratic weather conditions have resulted in low and unpredictable yields. Unsustainable farming practices create a cycle of poor soils. The long distance between farms and cities result in a high degree of spoilage and drop in nutritional value. Bacteria such as E. coli has found its way into our food, with soil as a main contributor. Low-tech farming practices overuse resources such as water and fertilizers. The food resilience of cities without local production are especially vulnerable to border restrictions. Many of the newer generation don't want to farm under the hot sun anymore. And finally, the rampant use of pesticides can actually cause various types of cancers. Archisen's vision is to provide everyone with the freshest, most nutritious, and flavorful produce. Our mission is to establish the largest network of urban farms in Asia by serving megacities the freshest, most nutritious, and flavorful produce. And we build the most profitable farms by combining crop intelligence, engineering innovation, and market insights, which we feel are three important factors for the success of a farm. And we bring together the brightest minds to make this happen and to make an impact on food ecosystems. At Archisen, we provide a holistic turnkey solution called DOM, that you see in the middle, so that anyone, even if they know nothing about agriculture, can profit from this venture. In our innovative business model, we design and build the farm, as well as grow and distribute the crops. Our indoor cultivation system provides 100 times the yield than that of traditional farming, and we use 90% less water than rural farming. We have numerous crop recipes in our database, and our systems are powered by automation and analytics. The produce are also produced locally, are pesticide-free, and they are very tasty. This is a brand of our vegetables, Just Produce, and can be found at justproduce.sg. Our vegetables are available online in supermarkets via the Just Produce brand. You can get your hands on our salads by looking at these various options over here, some of which you should be familiar with, such as Red Mart, Panda Mart, and Sheng Siong, and Grab Food. And the story behind the name is that the produce is just been harvested from the farm, and it does not contain any pesticides, GMOs, or preservatives, just nutritious and flavorful vegetables. This is a salad box, which has 4 options and contains a variety of butter crunch lettuce, red loose leaf lettuce, purple olive lettuce, Tuscan kale, mustard, sorrel, and mizuna. More importantly, our farming system has a sustainable impact on the environment. We reduce the carbon footprint by shortening the food supply chain and providing the vegetables within 24 hours of harvesting, encouraging the younger generation to take up farming, increasing the safety of vegetables that we consume, and reducing the amount of food waste that goes to the bin during food processing. We are also directly addressing several of the key sustainable development goals that you see over here. So as we look into the future, companies are looking to develop technologies in these areas in order for this industry to be sustainable. Lighting for plants that are more energy efficient while providing the spectrum that's optimal for growth. Enhanced nutrient mixers that will increase the yield and nutritional value of crops. Increase manpower productivity by automating tasks in the farm and improving operational workflow. Monitor and formulate strategies to reduce the overall energy consumption of the farm. Maximize and optimize yields via crop science research. Reduce crop death or damage by controlling environmental conditions and growing methods. Use of farming equipment that requires low maintenance. Development of new growing systems. And the development of new crop varieties using non-GMO methods. Currently, we have 8 people in our team. My co-founder, Savan, who's the CTO. We have a guy looking at crop science, Jiahui, business development, Amy, sales, Leon, robotics, Jianglei, engineering, Yo Liang, and software, Safiq. And we are truly privileged to have this committed team who have a strong interest in learning and to innovate solutions for the industry, for the future of Singapore. Of course, we also have, we are honored to have within our group advisors such as Roger, who advise us on various aspects of the agri-food business. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation, and over to you, Darren.
Thank you, Vincent, for that insightful sharing about Archisen and the important role it plays contributing to Singapore's food security. I will confess that before your presentation tonight, the only images that urban farming conjures up in my mind are those little community fruit and vegetable gardens in HDB estates, tended by retiree uncles and aunties. I now know that there is a burgeoning agtech industry happening right here in my own backyard. So I am impressed that crop yield from your indoor cultivation systems is, you said, 100 times that of traditional farming. So Vincent, will you please share with us the factors that your architecture of sensors detect and measure?
Okay, so there are various factors that contribute towards the sustainable flow of a farm. And sensors are there to monitor growing conditions so that proper actions can be undertaken to ensure that the conditions are optimal. Parameters such as temperature, humidity, CO2, and nutrients are monitored constantly, while cameras are also used to record anomalies in plants or farm workflow. So these are the various factors that are usually monitored to ensure that the farm is operating sustainably so that you can achieve the yield that you are looking at.
So there has got to be more than
the other factor, Darren, that contributes to his productivity in Archisen is that his plant rows are vertical rather than horizontal.
Right.
And that has the effect of giving you using up the empty air space on top so that you can create more plants per square foot of footprint.
That's a very good point, Roger. Thanks for that. It's like building up the HDB style of growing, huh? So,
Okay, correct.
but I still think, Vincent, Roger, there has got to be more than Archisen sensors that meets the eye. What other technology do you employ to give you this very high crop yield advantage? I mean, can you share some? I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to share some trade secrets.
Yeah. As mentioned in the technology landscape earlier, there are various technologies that we are looking at as well. For instance, automation to increase the manpower productivity and square foot yield of the farm. Developing new seed varieties with better yield, but they are non-GMO. Formulating nutrient fertilizers for optimal growth, and developing farm management software to analyze and predict yield patterns. This software also helps with task assignment and ensuring that farm hands or those working within the farm adhere to what is being assigned to them. So these are the various technologies that we are looking at together with the sensors that ensures the proper operation of a farm.
Okay, thanks for that, Vincent. At this point in time, I'd just like to take a few seconds off. For those who join slightly later, if you'd like to ask any questions, please simply click on the Q&A button, which is represented by two speech bubbles at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you do not see this Q&A button, please move your cursor to the bottom of the screen, and the Q&A button will display. I will then pose the questions to the panelists. So back to the topic. During the early stage of the COVID-19 pandemic, we read of major supply chain logistics disruption since workers were displaced and they were no longer able to bring produce on farms to many restaurants. They were forced to shut down. Consequently, we've read of farmers in nearby Malaysia dumping their vegetables, such a pity, and even dairy farmers in the United States draining their milk production into sewage. This unfortunate event and other food export restrictions can reasonably be expected to have contributed to the panic shopping of groceries, actually, and even non-food items such as toilet papers, which we now know is apparently an item with no comparable substitutes for many people. So, Vincent, how has traditional farming and the agtech industries each been affected by COVID?
Yes, thanks for the question, Darren. The COVID-19 pandemic has actually highlighted the importance of local production in many cities around the world. This is to ensure that food can be provided to local residents when supply lines are disrupted. Now, the focus is on automation because it reduces the reliance on workers and the need for remote monitoring. So with these technologies, you are able then to be able to manage a farm with less number of workers as well as from a far away location. And with the retail and restaurant sector hit badly, food producers have also shifted online, and they actually have to figure out ways to provide the food directly to the consumers instead of going through various transport providers or middlemen.
In the case of supply disruption or discontinuity because of political factors, having local production that is able to scale the way Archisen is able to do it actually makes you more resilient in being able to respond to unexpected demand surge for local products when imported products don't come in. So because you are a phone call away from the farm, the farm is able to react in terms of rejigging their supply plans. So that's another reason why enterprises such as Archisen and the technology they employ makes us more resilient in terms of reacting to supply disruptions.
Thank you for that, Roger. The Singapore government spends about $144 million in research on food security. Roger, you have much experience observing the food industry, both locally and overseas. Will you please enlighten us why the Singapore government is investing so much in agri-food?
Well, firstly is that observation number one, food consumption is very hard to postpone. you cannot cut off food supply to a population without major dissension and troubles and trauma. So having continuity in food supply in the right quantity and in the right quality and right safety level is actually a public good, and a public good that is being addressed by the government, I think, pretty well. Now, secondly, is that food as a component of household spending is disproportionately higher in the poorer segments of society. So eventually, if you don't manage it correctly, you may end up with a political issue because one man, one vote. So I think that it is right and appropriate that the government should address food security and look at how they can incentivize and anticipate it. Of course, you can try to grow wheat in the desert like the Saudis do, but you know, in Singapore's context, that would be a foolish use of money because we are not a Saudi Arabia. So I think it's appropriate that they have come up with policies and incentives for companies like Vincent to be able to further develop and deepen their technological capability, and to experiment and take to the demand factors the kind of high quality vegetables that they can supply.
Thank you for that,
So
Roger.
all for it. Yeah.
So Vincent, you had earlier mentioned that Archisen has 90% water efficiency, if I hear you right. So for our tiny island state, water security is of course of paramount importance. It seems this area is well taken care of with the technology that you have. So Vincent and Roger, would you please share what are the other areas that the Singapore government is spending on its research and development for the agri-food industry?
Yeah. So like to mention, thanks Darren for the question. I'd like to mention again that Singapore imports 90% of our food. So in terms of food resilience, we are particularly vulnerable to price fluctuations due to unfavorable conditions and availability of supply due to border controls and restrictions, especially during a pandemic. Singapore faces a challenge of expensive land and labor. So we need to see how we can use technology effectively such that agricultural output is competitively priced with overseas imports. In the recent Singapore Food Story Program grant, the government is actually involved in a concerted push towards the development of productive and climate-resistant and sustainable technologies for agriculture and aquaculture, as well as looking at biotech-based food and ingredients. And there's also a focus on a robust and future-ready food safety systems. So I feel that these are all important technologies that the Singapore government is looking at, especially in the next few years.
Yeah. Don't forget that the government has also established almost a decade ago the rice stockpile scheme, and there are a few other commodities that for which a stockpile exists. So that in times of panic, you know, there were only minor difficulties, not major disruptions. So, and now we are moving towards more and more refined policies to do specifically with proteins, specifically to do with vegetables, specifically to do with sugar maybe. So I think that the government eventually will get it right. Nobody has got the golden answer, but there are certainly intelligent people looking at it, and they will eventually come to the right answers. But they are trying.
Okay. In March last year, the Environment and Water Resources Minister, Mr. Masagos Zulkifli, announced that Singapore's 30 by 30 goal, which is to produce 30% of Singapore's nutritional needs locally by 2030. Singapore wants to be less vulnerable, as you have mentioned, to the volatility of the global food market, which is expected to be adversely impacted by widespread declines in crop yields of up to a quarter by 2050 due to global warming. However, as you have mentioned, Vincent, Singapore presently imports over 90% of its food. So do you think this plan, to all the panelists, do you think this plan is too ambitious or something Singapore can realistically achieve? Are there any big gaps that require immediate attention to? And what do you think the government need to catalyze or provide support for to achieve this goal?
Yeah, I'll sort of start here because I'm not the expert and I sort of come from a very high level lens here, right? I think there are a few areas that the government needs to think about coordinating in a very tight fashion for industries or for companies like Archisen to succeed, and for our 30 by 30 to succeed. The first of all is the land use, that needs to be coordinated with the other statutory boards or the other regulations as to what can be used for farming land. Right, I think this plus the broader coordination across whether it's AVA, BCA, URA, JTC, all these need to come together and make sure that the rules and regulations are harmonized so that it allows the appropriate flourishing of companies such as Archisen, because they definitely are, if bring better yields and better usage of land and provide food security at the same time. The next point is actually, I believe every time we take on a new initiative, the government needs to look after the talent pool and the talent supply and the talent chain across, from the senior scientists at the R&D level to what do you need? You need robotics expertise, you need, mechanical engineering expertise, electrical engineering expertise. But also sort of, maybe also the labor that goes, which is below the professional level, blue collar level perhaps, or the logistics level, to make sure that, the ecosystem survives and flourishes to be able to achieve that 30 by 30. Of course, we know the Singapore government is extremely efficient, and if they set their mind to it, I'm sure they will succeed. But I'm sure there are a lot of areas that Vincent will point out that there could be areas to improve on.
Yes, I agree with you. The issue right now is that food security for a little country like ours with such land scarcity, there are no silver bullet answers that exist yet. So we will eventually grope towards a right solution. Now, our government is not one that's shy to execute. It's got the political will, but first of all, it must find the right answer to execute against. And I would suggest that we give them time to take feedback from companies like ours, to take feedback from the markets, and to take feedback from observing real world behaviors. And eventually they will come up with the right strategic set. And that's when you will see them form possibly a whole of government approach to solving the problem of security. I would also go back to Darren's comments about 30 by 30. I'm not sure whether it will work, but we have no choice but to try. This is existentially important for all Singaporeans. I've eaten my fair share of meals in the world, but my grandchildren have to eat. So I think that is a good aim. I think it's a good start point, and we have to all work together as a nation and as a community to figure out what's the best solution, because it doesn't exist yet. There's no format for this problem.
That's a very rousing response so far from the two of you, I would say, and very apt, I would say,
right.
just weeks away from our National Day, the can-do spirit, existential problem. All this sounds very familiar from certain politicians. Vincent, do you have any?
Darren, perhaps I can just add that. Yeah, so I just wanted to add that I think that the government is moving in the right direction. Recently, the National Parks Board actually distributed seeds to households to encourage growing of vegetables at home. And there have been many community garden plots all over Singapore for quite a long time actually. Rooftop farms are actually currently in the process of rooftops are actually being awarded to farmers to grow stuff. And there's also run calls to actually build more farms in a very rapid timeline. There are also various R&D grant calls by the Singapore Food Agency to tackle these issues. So I think Singapore is taking this very seriously, and I don't think it's too ambitious to achieve this goal. Yeah.
So Vincent, now I've never been to an urban farm, but from a presentation, it sure looks to me a pretty cozy, climate-controlled environment to work in, unlike traditional farming where one is exposed to the harsh elements. Has the urban farming sector been able to attract the younger and educated workforce to join its ranks?
Yes, certainly. In our company, we have received strong interest from internships from local ITEs, universities, polytechnics, and schools. And after completing their internships, we have also hired them as permanent staff. Because many of them do not have formal agricultural qualifications, they were able to get hands-on experience during the internships. Recently, the government also launched a traineeship program, and we are receiving a lot of interest from there as well. Many of the staff that join us actually want to contribute to the agricultural revolution, and they actually believe that there's a lot of potential for growth for not only the industry, but also for themselves in the coming years.
So, from my observation, the world seems to be on an irreversible path of artificial intelligence adoption. So, Roger and Vincent, do you see urban farms adopting AI automation, robots and drones to monitor, harvest, maybe even distribute the urban farm's produce, right, to fill up the last mile problem, and aim towards minimal human workforce requirement? After all, I would imagine such a high-tech work environment to be rather appealing to the younger workforce and help us to further minimize any supply disruptions in the event of future pandemics.
Can I go
so
first?
Maybe I'll start first. Yeah, go ahead, Roger. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Darren, I'll tell you a story. Several years ago, when I first started looking at the supply side issues on vegetables, I asked the scientists who advise us, or the technical people who advise us, said, is farming of vegetables a craft or process? Because if it's a craft, then you need a different kind of workforce. You need somebody who cares, somebody goes in, sing to the plant every day, and maybe the plant will grow a bit bigger, faster. And the answer that came back was that it's a process. Because it's a process, it can be automated. I think that's one. Secondly, is that if you look at traditional farm labor, farm labor is needed at a high during the time of planting and seeding, and during harvesting. In between, very little. Maybe you do a bit of weeding. So when you automate, you actually can smooth out the use of labor to the extent that you no longer use farm labor for their hands, but farm technicians for their skills. And that, to me, when you walk through Vincent's urban farm, is what you see. You see people in lab coats, people who read instruments and read data.
Oh, that's interesting. So it turns the whole idea of farming into more like a technologist, the whole concept of farming turning upside down.
Correct.
So, yeah. So perhaps I can, thanks Roger, perhaps I can provide my perspective from a technical point of view. So I feel that automation plays a very critical role in manpower productivity and maximizing the use of space. And many of the processes that we do over here involve seeding, transplanting, and harvesting processes. And they can be automated with a very high degree of speed and accuracy. There's actually a company from NUS that's that has developed robotic bees that can assist with pollination. So they ensure a higher rate of pollination and they reduce the need for manual pollination. We're also looking at image analysis, so you can evaluate the health of plants. And like I mentioned earlier, by using sensors, the conditions can be measured in real time. So many of these activities that we're trying to measure and analyze is stuff that cannot be done by a normal person, and the equipment can just far outweigh the capabilities of that of a normal person. Yeah.
So far we've spoken about the regulations, the technology behind urban farming at Archisen. Vincent, you cited the need, so let's go on to a little bit more on the economics, and which I think a lot of the participants will be eager to hear too. So you cited the need to procure expensive equipment and high operation costs in running high-tech urban farms. Can you give us an idea of such costs and how they stack up against traditional farms?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Darren. For indoor farms, or high-tech farms or urban farms, because they are more productive per unit area, the setup cost per unit area is normally higher than that of a traditional farm. But in the long term, as the conditions are tightly controlled and the output is highly predictable, the operational costs and variable costs of production are better managed. And so risks associated with crop loss or crop death are better managed in this process. Now, the actual setup costs actually depend on the facility, the crop type, and the location of the farm. So it could range in the thousands to the millions, depending on the scale that you're looking at, and also depending on the various aspects that I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
So are these high fixed and variable costs the main hindrance towards the higher adoption of urban farms?
So they do present a barrier to entry for players in the industry. But when you see that the variable costs are actually better managed through a highly controlled environment, the project actually becomes more investable as compared to a rural farm because there's more predictability and the numbers are a lot more controllable.
Darren, cost accounting 101, you drive volume through fixed costs. So when you are able to have 100 times the volume productivity, you have a chance to pay off the higher fixed costs.
Yes, sir. Thanks for refreshing my memory on that. It's been a long time, but not quite as long as yours. So is this high barrier to entry thus an advantage to Archisen in the sense that only the strongest companies with sound technology and execution plan will be able to attract the necessary funding to grow and survive?
No, I think that my answer is that it actually favors a Singaporean context where the cost of the land in which you operate will be high to start with. And so therefore it behooves you to try to pay for that land by using capital to increase productivity.
Yeah, I agree with Roger. I think generally there are many ways to grow food, right? And the market is big. And it is definitely encouraging that there are a lot more people growing food now. And the government is encouraging more people to grow food, whether it's at home, or in small spaces, even in office spaces. So I feel the industry is generally big. Of course, there's a barrier to entry to build larger scale farms with high economies of scale, which is something that we're focusing on. But I still feel that there is a space for other types of community and smaller scale farms so that people can actually grow enough to actually feed themselves at home.
So Vincent, if I hear you right, it sounds like Archisen is a technology firm. So, but do you actually operate the urban farms, and what is your revenue model?
Yeah, so we currently act as a farm and technology consultant, and also as a system integrators, where we provide expertise on building, setting up the farm, and also operating the farm, as well as the sales of the produce. So these are the various levels of operation and the way that we work with our partners.
So is has Archisen generated any revenue?
Yes. I think we are currently revenue positive. We are operating for a few years now, and there's a lot of lessons that we have learned along the way. And we have also generated revenues on the various avenues that I mentioned earlier.
So where are these urban farms located? I mean, at least I haven't seen them. I don't know where they are, so I'm curious to find.
Yeah. So generally, we are looking at, in order to make Singapore more competitive, we are looking at underutilized spaces. So in Singapore, there are rooftops, and there are also indoor industrial spaces, industrial buildings. Right now, there are actually still a lot of available spaces in various parts of Singapore, north, south, east, and west, that have empty spaces that can be used for farming. Yeah.
Okay. So far we've been talking about Singapore, right? But Singapore is so small, but for bigger countries and cities, is it practicable to further reduce the carbon footprint by siting these urban farms within residential areas so that both the workers and the produce will travel shorter distances?
Yes, certainly. I think there's enormous benefits for reducing the supply chain. Not only are you reducing the carbon footprint, but you're increasing the freshness of the vegetable so that you retain the nutritional value, and you can actually know where your vegetable comes from, and you can actually go to the farm to see the vegetable that is being harvested. And when you know your food, or when you know where your food comes from, there's a lot more connection to the food, and there's a lot more appreciation for local production. So definitely, when the food is closer to the source, there's enormous benefits, not to mention the availability of supply, especially during difficult situations.
So who takes care of the logistics and the delivery of the produce to end customers? Is it the urban farm itself and not Archisen?
Yeah, so I think generally there are various parts of the value chain. So for the farm, usually you're responsible for the production of the vegetables. Then of course there's the delivery side to the end consumer. And right now, of course, there are various delivery platforms that a lot of us are actually ordering online right now. So I would say that there are various parts of the value chain. You don't need to be involved in every part of the value chain. But for us, we are very focused on farm operations and farm production and the technologies around the farm.
Okay. So can you share, with the audience, what kind of crops do Archisen presently bring to market?
Yeah, so I think I briefly mentioned that in the Just Produce brand that we mentioned earlier, there are actually 4 types of products that we have. It's actually a salad that you can order and you can just consume. With online ordering right now, you can get it within the hour. And we have a combination of different types of lettuce, such as butter crunch, red loose leaf, purple oak leaf. We also have kale, mustard, sorrel, mizuna, and generally different types of leafies that fit into a salad mix.
So how do their prices compare to the competitors?
Yeah, so currently it's competitively priced. So it's $4 for 100 grams, and typically you can fit it very well into a meal, and you can have whatever. You can have various types of salad recipes to consume that salad. And so the objective is to ensure that we are competitive with imported produce so that consumers can make an easy decision to switch over to local produce.
So I did notice from your slides, okay, so range. So from my limited understanding, tropical produce are obviously widely available in the markets, right, here in Singapore at low cost, since there are so many suppliers in this region. Whereas if I could call it the temperate produce, such as the strawberries and the blueberries and peaches, etc., they're so expensive, right? I just think about Korean strawberries. Whereas, for example, in the States, I could get a bucket of blueberries at an orchard at a fraction of what we pay here. So why aren't you focusing on this higher priced products to generate higher revenue?
Yeah. So we have experimented and we are looking at other fruiting crops in the market, such as what you have mentioned, tomatoes, strawberries. But it also depends on the demand in the market and the cost of production and the price of the produce in the market. And so we are working towards achieving the optimal spot of price, cost of production, and the demand in the market so that the crop can be sustainable and the overall production process can be profitable. Yeah, so this is definitely something that we are looking to produce in the pipeline.
So how does Singapore now stand compared with other countries with regards to this urban farming sector?
Sorry, you're referring to specifically in terms of what the Singapore government is doing in terms of producing
No,
crops?
in terms of urban sector, right? How developed is Singapore compared to other countries? You know,
I'll tell you that in Thailand, I don't see any urban farming enterprises. In Malaysia, they're still very much focused on Cameron Highlands and greenhouses. In China, there's actually quite extensive use of indoor farming, but of a different technology base. And of course, Japan has a lot of it. And in the US, this is OHAT now.
Okay.
Vincent,
just to build on Roger's comment. So although this urban agriculture industry started off in Japan, US, and Europe many years ago, and actually these countries actually have a benefit of a strong agricultural history. However, Singapore has a benefit as a highly globalized country to learn from what is out there. And because food resilience is crucial for the stability of our country, so the government has put massive efforts to advance this industry. And I would say in the next few years, Singapore has the potential to be a leader actually in the high-tech agriculture industry.
So as much as urban farming allows for vertical growth, Singapore still has limited land to be dedicated to this very important sustainable growth sector. Oi Yee, how do you view the opportunities beyond this shores and where do you see them?
Yeah, I think if there's any time that would highlight the importance of food security and having some level of supply close to the ground, right? If you think about the big cities, even if it's Bangkok or Malaysia, and sometimes you would think, oh, is that insane because there's so much farmland in Thailand or there's so much farmland in Malaysia. But when the pandemic hits and you have logistics issues and all those things come into play, it's no worse than us saying, well, Malaysia is not that far away, right? And we feel slightly insecure. So, I think anybody who lives in a very, very large, sprawling urban city, or these cities should consider building out the infrastructure or allowing rules and regulations to develop the sector.
Yeah, the fact that urban agriculture can be, urban farming can be more people efficient and use a higher caliber of manpower actually reduces your reliance on foreign labor, be it here in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Indonesia. So actually, it's a pretty good solution for urban conurbations where urban density is high, where traffic jams are bad. I think this is a pretty darn good solution.
Do you have any cities that comes to mind, Roger?
Well, which cities do you know of where in the evening the highways look like car parks?
Quite a few actually.
Quite a few, yes.
Beijing is like that even at midnight.
Yeah, these are the countries that might be potentially good markets for such a product and a technology.
What about underutilized old buildings, in certain cities or where the countries or cities have expanded way too fast without naming, right? And so these are basically like ghost buildings, ghost cities. What are there any opportunities with these empty buildings?
No, sometimes they are empty because the owner of the asset is holding on to it like a bank, right? Like a land bank or asset bank. So we think that if we are able to convince some of these to introduce urban farming, Vincent's type of urban farming in their underutilized buildings, then actually the owner of those assets can generate a coupon.
That's very interesting. Oi, with your vast investment banking experience in this region, do you foresee company ownership laws as a potential hurdle, or what other challenges do you foresee? And how can this be possibly be resolved if business is to be expanded beyond Singapore?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, right? Because like real estate, and if you think about ASEAN is extremely heterogeneous, right? We don't have a consistent framework of laws and foreign ownership. If you go to Indonesia, I'm quite sure the agricultural regulations are very skewed towards palm oil, or there's certain lobby groups. And the question is whether or not a foreign-based group is going to be welcome there. There are also obviously land use issues. So I think this can all be overcome with the right structure and the right approach. But I think every country will have different nuances. And I think it would require the different governments to be quite focused on this as a very important initiative, and potentially help to find partners for Archisen to work with. I think that would be quite key.
Yeah, the key is for us to develop our own supply side capability so that we produce the best product, the healthiest product, and at the most efficient way of production. Once we have that, it'll be a proposition that's hard to turn down.
That's true. Okay, so right now, we have actually a lot of questions that have yet to really pose. So let me take some time right now to pose this very interesting questions. One question: for urban farmers and a family of 4, how much would it cost to set up an urban farming unit in a HDB flat? And how long would it take to produce crops for consumption?
Okay.
Vincent.
So I think in general, yeah, thanks for the question, Darren. Sorry, I'm just thinking about the question as you're asking it. I think there are various ways to grow food. Of course, the cheapest. There is a soil-based method, there's a hydroponics method, there's aeroponics method, and each of it comes with various costs. I think there are some people who actually grow it at home using styrofoam boxes or other types of boxes and soil. I think there are various training programs by parks, national parks, or even the polytechnics such as Republic Polytechnic that actually teaches people how to do farming. And so I think there are various ways to go about it. I don't think it's very expensive. The typical crop cycle, I think, from a seedling to a full harvest probably is about a month. Yeah, depending on the type of vegetable. It will probably take a much longer time for a fruiting crop as compared to a leafy vegetable, because generally for fruiting crops you need to wait for the flower and then pollination and then the fruit. Whereas for a vegetable, you could just harvest it once the vegetable reaches a full size. Yeah.
So another question is, can this work only in big cities, or is it okay to try this in rural and vast places too?
Yeah, certainly. I think this ability and a technology to actually grow food sustainably can actually be done in various parts of the world. I wouldn't say there is a best growing system out there. There are, in different types of or different communities, there will be different types of growing systems that would be suitable. So in certain rural plantations, it may be better suited to growing certain types of crops or fruits that are suitable for that community over there and something that they would prefer to eat. And so it depends on the type. It depends on where that city is. But regardless of where that farm is, whether it's a rural farm or an urban farm, they definitely can benefit from technology. So the importance is to see how they can use technology to increase the yield for the crop that they are growing.
This next question is actually very interesting. So the attendee is asking, the technology sounds great. Could you please comment on how Archisen's strategy will address loss of food diversity if you were to focus on growing only certain popular species of food due to market demand and other species causing other species not to be grown anymore? And also, can you talk about the potential impacts, basically pollution or any byproducts that might be generated by this strategy or by urban farming? So food diversity, is there any risk or loss of food diversity due to demand driving you to produce, or urban farms to produce only a certain narrow group of produce?
Yeah, so I think generally the objective is to work towards being able to produce food or vegetables that can be consumed by the community living in that area. And I think it's important to do so. Now, however, sometimes urban farms may face certain restrictions due to the various economic factors and what is useful to produce. In Singapore, I think over here, because we import 90%, there's a lot of different types of, there's a lot of market for us to actually produce the vegetables. The thing about urban farming or producing where the consumption is that we actually reduce the carbon footprint associated with transporting the food over long distances. And we actually reduce the food waste because the food are actually grown a lot more sustainably and in a controlled manner as compared to outdoor agriculture that may not be controlled so well. And along the supply chain process, when it's being shipped from a faraway place, for example, to Singapore, there's also food wastage in the process. So I would say that there are various aspects of benefiting the environment that urban farming provides.
So during this COVID period, has there been have you seen more demand or less demand for locally grown crops? And have you observed more urban farmers? Maybe Roger too, and Vincent?
Well, just going through the news flow and looking at the number of new urban farms that are coming online, I'll say that, yeah, there are a lot, and in different forms and at different sizes. So there is a general impetus, but all of this will, at the end of the day, converge towards an ideal solution for our circumstances. So let the best system win.
Okay. Do you think enough is being done for food sustainability? A very subjective question.
Well, if you're talking about sustainability as the ability to carry on producing forever and ever at infinitum, a process like an urban farm is actually easier to isolate the variables and make sure that there is continuity. So I would say, yeah, it's certainly no worse.
Okay. There's a trend towards organic fruit and vegetable consumption, and consumers are willing to pay a premium for pesticide-free food, which is something urban farms can accomplish. How does Archisen's produce compare to organic vegetables? So I guess, Archisen's urban farming produce versus organic.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So the produce that we have are actually pesticide-free. So we do not use any pesticides. Actually, some organic products still use organic pesticides, and they actually use more organic pesticides because they are not as effective as normal pesticides. So we position our vegetables as being safe, more nutritious because they are grown in the right and optimal environmental conditions for the vegetable. And when you provide the vegetables with the optimal lighting and nutrients and environmental conditions, they can express the nutrients better. And so when you consume the vegetable, there's actually a much higher nutritional value. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. This is a question posed by an anonymous attendee. Well, if it's possible, this person would like to find out your monthly cash burn rate. Is the company in cash flow break even?
Yeah, so we'll probably have to take this question offline.
Okay,
Yes.
understandable. Is this technology applicable in any climate? I guess, yeah, this is overseas investor.
Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
So this attendee is asking, whether your technology is applicable in any climate, to be adopted in any climate.
So, right. I think generally, in every climate, there are different types of vegetables that are suitable for it to be grown. For example, if you grow it indoors, then you can virtually grow. You can actually create the environmental condition wherever you are, right? So if you are over in Singapore and you want to grow a crop that typically grows well in, let's say, a temperate climate, you can then recreate that condition. And so from that aspect, you are able to then have a very controlled environment to grow the crop that you desire. But of course, there are other factors that come into the picture besides just growing any type of crop or fitting into any environment. You do have to look at other aspects that relate to what you're growing, what the market needs, the price of the crop in the market, and weigh it as you're setting up the farm.
So for Roger, this question, you might be able to shed some light. James Fan is asking, even though Singapore imports over 90% of our food, the country has often and is recently ranked as the top nation in terms of the Food Security Index, by the Global Food Security Index. Other than diversification of food sources, what do you feel are the reasons why Singapore has performed so well, has ranked so highly?
So we are lucky in that we are fairly price insensitive. In the case of an emergency, we are fairly price insensitive when it comes to food for our people. For instance, during COVID, when we ran out of eggs, I believe we sent Charlie 130 to go carry our eggs back for this market. So generally, what we need, we can afford. So I think that's one. Secondly, is that we are in the center of very good trade routes, and we have highly productive neighbors. So, that helps we're not kind of next to the big desert and which can't grow anything. Malaysia is burdened.
Okay. Question from Yen Chen. I saw in the mission that Archisen wants to provide megacities with produce. Is Archisen currently operating only in Singapore? And if so, is it intending to expand beyond Singapore, and when would that be?
Yeah, so certainly we are intending to expand to cities around the region. And of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there are restrictions around where we can go. But certainly, as with many startups in Singapore, we are looking at developing replicable technologies that can be implemented in cities in our surrounding region as well. And we do have a specific focus on Asia.
Okay, next question. What are the plans for Archisen as a business? Specifically, how do you plan to scale your revenue and your profits? And what's the end goal? Is an IPO in sight?
Yeah, so I think right now we are very focused on developing technologies, looking at innovating, looking at how we can help Singapore address food resilience, helping companies who are interested to actually build farms, and also focusing on our core expertise. And so there are various routes that we're looking at, but definitely we are looking at growth and how to help Singapore achieve its food resilience, and also to monitor very closely how the pandemic turns out and expand when the opportunity is right.
Okay, so the next question, maybe I'll put a little bit in context. So earlier we spoke about the Singapore government's 30 by 30 plan, right? And so that talks about 30% of our nutritional needs by the year 2030, 10 years from now. So this attendee is asking, should Singapore aim to be self-sufficient in terms of plant food supply? So I suppose he or she is asking to be 100% independent, fully we are independent in terms of our food produce, in terms of plant-based produce supply. What do you think?
We don't have enough land to be 100% self-sufficient. When we were hunter-gatherers, 1 square kilometer can support 3.5 human beings. And we don't have very many square kilometers to this island. So I think that we have to be practical. 30% is not a number that just came out of the air. I think that if you follow US legislation, early in the last century, they legislated that 30% of their food needs will be sourced locally. But for the US to do it on the continental land scale, and for Singapore to achieve the same on our small little island, is a very different set of challenges, which is why we need a very different set of solutions.
That's a good point. Vincent, so this question, how is Archisen's farms different from the other urban or rooftop farms currently being set up across Singapore? And also, how would you compete in terms of cost against the traditional low-cost land-based farms? So how are you different from other urban rooftop farms?
Yeah. So I think that once again, I feel that there's a lot of space for growth in terms of the urban farming industry. I would say that there are many farms also popping up, and there are a lot of players who are trying to see how they can contribute to Singapore's food security. And I think that's a good thing. For us, we focus a lot on technology. We focus a lot on the engineering, the crop science, focusing on building the market. And so these are our specific expertise that we're looking at. And we're also working on various R&D projects to see how we can target various problems that are being faced. So this is how we are very targeted in terms of how we are trying to help improve and advance the market. And so as compared to land-based farms, I think as I mentioned earlier, there is a space for land-based farms. And I don't think that, I think land-based farms will be here to stay. But land-based, there's also a space for urban farms, because in a space like Singapore, where we are trying to increase our local production, there is a need to see how we can do it more in a more effective manner. And maybe for Singapore, the traditional way of farming needs to be complemented with new technologies that can make it more productive and more efficient in terms of yield. So I would say that land-based farms will still have its place to stay, but they can definitely benefit from better technologies such as monitoring, sensors, analyzing the results, and seeing how to improve as they move with time.
Okay, so I think we're running out of time, but we have time maybe for 2 more questions. So a little bit to end the night, a little bit lighter questions. For the aspiring urban farmers out there, are there any tips or strategies that you can share?
Call Vincent.
Okay, that's a very good tip. So then what will Vincent say when Roger poses that to you?
Yeah, so generally I would say go for it. There's a lot of information out there right now. Just read up as much as you can, experiment, try. You don't need to go with something fancy and expensive. Try something at home, try and see if it works, try and see if it's suitable and it's your cup of tea before even investing more. There are lots of videos out there. There's a lot of materials, and there are lots of courses that are available out there at very competitive prices. And so I would say learn as much as you can and see the value of consuming safe and local produce. Yeah.
I would say that you have to look in the mirror and figure out whether you're a hobbyist or an investor. If you're a hobbyist, do things which gets you closer to nature, closer to nature's miracles, and enjoy the output of what you farm. And that is your satisfaction. But if you're an investor, then under the current scheme of things, you can either be a farm owner and be a user of the technology that Vincent and his team produces, or you can invest in companies like Archisen, which are developing the technologies to be used in farming. But those you would do for the standard 3 reasons why you would invest in the first place: risk, return, and reward. Risk, return, and risk and liquidity. So, you know, you have to be very clear what you want, and it's no good going through the process after 2 years saying that this wasn't what I was looking for.
Okay. Last question: is Archisen's technologies applicable to individual household to grow their own vegetables? Can we have our mini Archisen farms in my balcony? What does that mean? What does it do?
Yeah, unfortunately at this stage we don't put too much focus on individual household types of for farming. The technologies that we're developing are typically for larger scale farms. Yeah.
Yeah, you need industrial scale to apply the technologies and to derive benefit from the technologies that Archisen has.
Yeah, but I think if you are looking at seeing how you can deploy better technologies for growing vegetables at home, there are various types of sensors out there. If you go down to some of the online stores or local shops that sell farming equipment, there are certain types of sensors or instruments that you can use to get a better sense of how to grow crops better. So I think generally there is still avenue to improve or to increase technology in household farming.
Thank you very much, Vincent, Roger, and Oi Yee for your time. I think I've learned a lot about urban farming. All right, I'll keep my eyes peeled if I happen to run across one the next time, and I will definitely be very interested if I get the opportunity to visit one. It is something that's definitely very interesting. All right, as Roger, you mentioned, it is something that we have to do, to ensure Singapore's food security. And I think the road ahead is still very, very long and very bright. So with that answer, I wrap up today's webinar. On behalf of the iSTOX family, I would like to wish everyone a good evening, a good day, wherever you are, and please stay safe. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good night.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Oi Yee. Bye.